Do you know we all have psychic abilities and we all have mediumship abilities or mediumistic abilities? Have you considered that the most significant path towards healing grief, especially grief after losing a loved one, all kinds of grief, but grief after losing a loved one, the fastest path is through embracing your ability to communicate with your loved ones on the other side that are in spirit?
Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
This is Angelscapes, and I'm your host, Nancy Smith. Joining me in this episode is Reverend Graham Connolly, a spiritualist minister and a very active member in the spiritualist community. He practically runs, I don't know how many different centers, and keeps them cohesive and on target. And he's a high-level educator. In this episode, Graham and I discuss developing and using one's own spiritual gifts to lead a fulfilling life. So Graham's mission is to educate individuals and groups to bridge the analytical and the intuitive, and he does that by being a mentor and a tutor in various disciplines. He is a minister from the Spiritualist community, the NSAC. I'll ask him what that means in a minute. And he also is a certified minister and a commissioned healer. We'll talk about that a little bit too, so you know what that is. So welcome, Graham. Thank you for coming on to the podcast.
You're most welcome, Nancy, and thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. You are just a deep well of information, and I feel like I just don't spend enough time talking to you. So, you know, you have a. I know we wanted to talk about how to use your psychic gifts and your mediumistic gifts to live a fulfilling life. So let's dip into that a little bit. But I'm going to go back and ask you questions later about your about NSAC and all that stuff. But so what do you tell your students? They're all
So basically, and I also teach mediumship development, but what I try to tell them is that the skills of communicating and being a psychic or a medium are so important in just even your everyday life. So I'm encouraging people, and I want them to know that communicating with the unseen realm isn't simply just to talk with deceased people. It's actually completely about knowing that we are connected with everything around us. Okay. So the best example is that in 1973, I had a dream about a car accident that I would nearly die in, including all the injuries. And then 2 months later, it actually happened. So that's what got me started about wanting to understand the mechanics of how did I know that? Now, some people may say, maybe I manifested that, but I don't believe that, because all of my experiences since then have been validating that I just have to set the intention and I can get information, or you can talk with nature and aspects like that. So it's also a vehicle because of the science of quantum physics, okay? It's also a vehicle for you for like the law of attraction, all of those types of things, the art of visualization. So the same mechanics to change my life, or ask for things from spirit, God, creator, whichever term you wish to use. It's the same basic mechanics as setting the intention to go and try and connect with someone's mother or grandmother.
I've
So
always
that's
yeah.
mission.
I've always felt that way too. I always felt that When I talk to a guide, the same thing, or when I talk to soul, your higher self, I use the Akashic records a lot, which is the Akashic realm, which is the same as is very similar to mediumship. Yeah, and it's about getting information, but it's also about learning. I think that they teach us and guide us, and
Correct. And the word psychic comes from the Greek word psychos, which means is about the language of the soul. And we all talk so much about the third eye, the pineal gland, and the third eye. And that is one of the centers or the center for mental mediumship. So it's a part of our everyday structure within our energy system. So.
well, I wanted to go back and ask you. You said you teach your mediumship students, and sometimes someone will come in with the motivation and the intention to study mediumship so that they become a medium, in the public eye or whatever they do. But and that's mostly the kinds of mediums that I meet. But there's always somebody in the class, two or three, who they just want to know about it and how to use it in their lives, and I feel that sometimes I have to teach them differently. If somebody comes to you and wants to learn the mediumship skills, but they have no desire to ever be in front of people, um, what is it where do you bring them? What do you tell them? Teach them?
Well, we go through all the exercises, and for me, the foundation of psychic and mediumship is really intuition, or it's that time when you shake someone's hand and you just know that you can't trust them, or there's just this energetic decoding of the information, which makes you feel a little bit not off, but a little bit like, well, what am I going through? So it's intuition is the seat to me is the seat, trusting that intuitive guide. And big business people as well, they'll often say, well, my gut told me that this was the right decision to make. So that's the foundation. And then from there, you then start developing into psychic, which for me is the body language, the energy in the room. It's all of those aspects. And then you go to the specifics of mediumship. And we have a saying that all mediums are psychic, but not all
Yeah, I
psychic
was going to ask you
medium.
about that. Yeah.
So
But you can launch from your psychic abilities. You could launch towards mediumship.
correct. And for me as well, in my development over the years, I would even use events that were happening in the world. For example, uh, the value jet crash in Florida many years ago. I would just set the intention and say, well, what is that about? And I would be receptive to what I felt or what I heard. And I would make note of it, like either in a journal or something. And then later, as it all unfolded, I would be able to validate those data points. So, and in fact, for me, when I do my mediumship, um, as I'm connecting with loved ones, I actually have a specific protocol to try and determine, is it male, is it female, which side of the family are they from, and all of those little cues. But at the same time, a lot of my information is what we would normally call psychic. Okay. So a mediumship reading is actually, a lot of psychic information or symbolisms, but then it is created by a loved one who is giving the information.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. That's I think we've all learned something similar. Every single teacher is a little bit different. And you caught me with your certain protocol. Is it male or is it female? Is it, what side of the family is it on? Is it a family member at all? Could you tell us a little bit of what your protocol is, or is it secret? Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not a secret. I mean, I teach it in the actual, but it does sometimes take a long time to develop. And for example, what I have created with the aid of spirit and the deceased loved ones is I have what's called a psychic dictionary. Okay. And the psychic dictionary is like my express mail. So spirit wants to get the information to you as quickly and as accurately as possible. And it takes time and a willingness my relationship with spirit is not simply, okay, spirit, give me what I'm meant to tell the client. I'm constantly dialoguing with them, even during the reading. And so if I don't and I'm clairsentient. So what that means is that I feel spirit first. Then when I sense spirit coming into my vibration, then I get the pictures, which is clairvoyance. Then I hear the words,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
clairaudience, and so on. So it's building this method of dialogue to try and get all of those data points so that you can hopefully provide information accurately enough that they may say, "You've just brought in my father," So
Yeah. Yeah, you just described my father. You just brought him in, which is beautiful. If somebody is not a practice medium or is not a trained medium or maybe has touched into understands it, but it's not a big thing for them, and they lose a family member, so there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of grief. What are your thoughts on them connecting with their loved one on the other side in spirit?
well, what happens for me as well, and what I say to people and to clients at the same time, is to change the paradigm of how we interact. So, for example, some people expect their loved one to come in a certain manner. Maybe, for example, they love red cardinals, so they expect their loved one to come in a specific manner. And what they have to me, what's needed is to just be open and to work with spirit. So, for example, if you've just finished supper and you're putting the dishes by the sink and you suddenly have a thought about grandmother's cookies and you think, oh, I should bake grandma's recipe. So everybody might think that is just a spontaneous, random thought. But my paradigm is, okay, that my grandmother is standing next to me, possibly, and been giving me that information too, maybe. So whenever we're thinking or we suddenly think of, or our brother in spirit, I often, a perfect example is my sister. She's now in spirit, and she had colorful language is the best way to describe it. So if suddenly I'm doing something or suddenly I hear a lot of colorful language, my first question is, sis, is that you? So I actually engage with my spontaneous thoughts. Okay.
Oh, wonderful. So engage.
Right.
Don't think it through or outthink it. Engage.
Right.
Oh, wonderful.
It's like that, we get a flat tire and then later we find there was an accident on the turnpike and we all say, oh, that was spirit or my angels or whatever preventing me from being in the accident. That is probably a high probability. But in reality, it might also be simply a reflection of how you don't have a good relationship with your car. You're not keeping the tires pumped and all of those things. So it's a case of learning your methodology, and for me, it's psychic dictionary. So, for example, if I suddenly am with a client and I see a horse, I actually have three horses psychically in my definition: a Mustang, a Clydesdale or a draft horse, or
Clydesdale.
quarter horse,
Quarter
and
horse.
each of them represents what the client potentially is going through. So
So, what would a Clydesdale represent? You see a horse for your client, a Clydesdale, and
it typically means that they're having extremely difficult challenges in life, or they're needing assistance and needing the horses there to help plow the field or whatever it be.
okay,
It represents challenges for the individual. The Mustang represents I want to run free. I don't want to be tied down, and so on and so forth. But mostly, I see quarter horses, and in fact, it always is around the Kentucky Derby. So when I see the horse coming out of the Kentucky Derby gates, I then pay attention. How fast did that horse come out? Is the horse wearing blinkers? And all of these little nuances in the image that spirit presents to me is a representation of the client's personality or what they're going through. And it's my role then to dialogue with spirit to try and hone that in for the individual.
Oh, that's wonderful. You have on your own came up with the horse metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure it came naturally, organically. Um, how could you encourage people, or what could you say about people coming up with their own images organically? Like a barrel of monkeys for me is like, oh my gosh. But if I get a barrel of monkeys, there's a lot of nonsense going on in that person's life, and they need to sort out who's the real deal and who's the monkey. But so, how would you help someone build that vocabulary?
So another good example is I love Ted Andrews. He's now in spirit, but he has the Animal Speak book.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
So I also know that every animal has a message. So I pay attention as well to unusual instances of an animal, or maybe I see a couple of hawks and then a vehicle goes by with a picture of a hawk. Then I know that there's a probability that this has some significance for me, and then I dialogue. And it really comes down to what feels comfortable or asking the question. So, for example, one time I had a dream about vultures,
Okay.
and I went. I'm not. I went to a dream dictionaries type thing, and it was about greed and avarice, but that didn't resonate for me. So I said, okay, well, what is that? So I then went to the Ted Andrews book,
Oh,
etc., and it was about transformation. And what I was going through in my life was a
yeah.
death and a rebirth. So now, whenever I see a vulture, I know there's a death and rebirth. So it's a case of feeling what resonates with you, and and asking the question of God or spirit, saying, "What's the meaning of the vulture in my dream?" Okay. And it takes time because, and also a lot of people feel, am I imagining this? But the reality of psychic, and for me, the reality of psychic and mediumship is that everything has to be processed by the brain. Okay.
True.
So without the brain giving the information so that we can get into that process, you're bound to think that I'm just imagining it. You're bound to think it's just a memory from grandmother. Okay. So once we can recognize that, and also it can be one simple fragment. I often used to have people come to the Portland Spiritualist Church and they would say, I'm told that I'm a medium and I'm 98% accurate. Immediately I hear that, I'm like, that's a little bit of ego maybe, or potentially, and I try not to judge because I think
Yeah.
even if I'm above the chance level, or even if I'm around 30%, and that person really believes I brought in information for them that makes them know that their loved one is with them, I've done my job. It doesn't matter what percentage of accuracy I have.
Yeah, let's check. Let's go a little further with that accuracy. I remember somebody saying, a teacher saying that if you have 80% accuracy in any reading, that's high level, that's amazing. And I don't really know how to measure it, but I do have situations where, and then a lot of people do, if it's not quite exactly right, just like, just exactly right, however they think exactly right is, then it's not accurate, then it's not good, and then the message isn't received or accepted. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, when it's received or accepted, and also we have the challenge of at the time you're doing the reading as well, the client is constantly trying to process and keep up with you as well. So, and I've had new, and sometimes, excuse me, sometimes we say, take that with you, okay? Because it may come up later. And that does happen. You know, I've had calls 2 days later and go, I can't believe that I said I didn't know who that was, you know. It was my mother, thank you, you know, and things like that. So the accuracy is something that to me is partly the ego and our human experience, because as a medium as well, we're always wanting to be as accurate as possible. We all want to help use these skills to, because there's nothing that can really, I mean, what I'm trying to say is the grief and the loss, and especially if it was the loss of a child or something, you
Yeah.
know, that is so hard. There will always be a little seed there. But the real key aspect is to be able to bring information so that they know that life is continuous and that their loved one is around them.
It's beautiful. Yes, absolutely. I want to put this on the table as something that I listened to. It was a documentary on grieving, and it wasn't presented by mediums, but they did bring in the mediumship connection as a way to heal. They were talking about grief, grief that was just going beyond. People were not able to function. They it's been years they haven't been able to step back into their lives. I forget the term that they use for it, but there was a study in this documentary. They described the study that was done, I think, in one of the Denmark countries, where they also studied grieving people with this profound grief. And the ones that came out of it the best were the ones that were talking to their loved ones. A lot of them were journaling. They would start to journal and they just say, Dear Henry, you know, I really miss you. And then they imagine Henry would be talking to them. And then after doing it a few times, Henry was really talking to them. And they, in this country, they will go to a therapist or a grief counselor and they'd say, well, you know, maybe take some more meds, or your grief is kind of going a little wonky. But in this country, they said they encouraged them to continue to connect with Henry. And that person, those people that did that thrived. They stepped out of the profound grief and they started to have more engagement with life. And I would, could you comment about that a little bit? I mean, I know you know what I'm.
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of it as well is about the culture they're from. So, you
Yeah.
know, my mother was Austrian during the Second World War. She was on the Russian front, etc., and managed to get back to England, escape to England. But you know, the cultures like Iceland and other and Scandinavians, they talk about fairies. It's part of their everyday culture. You know, they actually, you know, have trouble. One time there's a very famous story of how they were trying to build a road through a mountain or etc., and they didn't go and ask for the permission from the unseen realm, from the fairies, and everything went wrong with the trucks and this, that, and the other. So there's this cultural base, which is a good foundation of how they talk with their ancestors, and it's so much a part of their culture. The other thing too for me as well is I am not, I have to be very careful as a medium because I am not a social worker. There are some clients where I automatically know that, you know, I've done the best I can through quote mediumship, but they're going to benefit from a more classic approach. And I have to also be aware of how I provide the information because I am not, like I say, I'm not a social worker. So everything we say doing our mediumship we have to do it from the heart and from the love, and just be aware of that, because society, there are so many little things if you're not careful. So, for example, the best example I can give, one of the top questions that I'm asked in my mediumship is, are they happy?
Yes. Are
How
they
to
happy?
say
Yeah.
it's a different
Yeah.
expression of life. It's like they're this holographic representation or database of their life experiences. They, for me, they've gone back to, they're now the divine seed of God again. Illnesses, emotional challenges, health challenges, all of those are now no longer part of their vibration. However, they have the ability to communicate to a medium aspects of their life that can help the person who is still here. So I really have a hard time of that, because it's like being happy is really a subjective experience.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful, or that's the question that they want. So
Right.
we have to be aware of all of those dynamics.
Do you think our work as spiritualism, or just even the movement of spiritualism itself, can affect a change in how people look at grief and grieving and death and loss?
Um, Interesting question. It can, because we have a lot of people, and now there's, at one time, 20, 30 years ago, the main avenue for getting information from the spirit side of life was the religion of spiritualism from those
Right,
churches.
right, 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 right.
But
Yeah.
interestingly enough, the dynamics, I was raised Catholic, and also intercession prayer and so on, it's coming from that divine source. It's just different terminologies or different definitions or different aspects of it. So the religion, I actually believe there are millions and millions of spiritualists, but we haven't, they don't necessarily embrace themselves with the religion of spiritualism. Wayne Dyer and all of those people, they say, or the famous one with his book with the butterfly, when he's trying to think of the title of the book, and suddenly a butterfly lands on his leg while he's meditating or while he's with nature, and he knows that that butterfly is a loved one from the
Yeah.
spirit side of life. So we actually have all of those. We have spiritualists in many, many other religions as well. However, it's not necessarily the religion of spiritualism. So what's unique for me, or what led me to learning mediumship and getting credentialed, is that the teachings and what I was learning is, my mother always used to say, God and Jesus is with you. And also whenever two people meet, and, aspects like that. And so I have this perspective of, I'm part of nature. Nature's part of me. I'm part of God. God's part of me. God's the divine essence of God is in me. And Jesus is a way shower. Jesus was a prophet. Jesus was a healer. He was teaching about love and other aspects. Those are all principles to me that I actually get from the religion of spiritualism as well. So,
So beautiful, beautiful. I I want to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about you personally. People can get a hold of you. Your website is terrasaholistics.com. It's spelled out on their nameplate if anyone wants to look at it. And that website, what will they find? Will they find you?
so yes. So, Terrasa Holistics was actually from a Great Pyrenees dog that from a former relationship back in, I think it was like 1991 or somewhere around there. And it was named after her because Terrassa is a town in the Pyrenees Mountains.
Oh,
And the dog only lasted or I lasted. Only lived for about a year and a half and had a heart
Oh,
defect.
oh, so sorry.
No, that's how it was to be. So I named my practice, or my first domain name, when they first were coming out, to honor that dog. Okay. So because that dog taught me so much, and also an Akita dog that my partner used to have and I inherited, that dog used to was the alpha over this male Akita. It was really funny to watch. So I was honoring that, and that's where that came from. So Tuasa Holistics was just to honor that dog originally, and it's been out on the internet for 20, 30 years.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So, but that's where that comes from. And so what I'm offering is, like you said earlier, my mission now is to help people bridge the analytical and the intuitive. So, for example, these same skills that I developed and honed for mediumship, I actually utilized in designing microchips.
Wow.
And so that's where, so my mission now is to help people to know that these two realms, they're part of everyday life. Don't be afraid of them. Okay. So that's what my mission is. And there's you can have the aspects of, you'll find me about the readings, about, I also, in addition, I was always nervous of horses from the age of 10. And then in 2019, I ended up doing a workshop on craniosacral therapy for equines.
Oh,
So now
wow.
I work with Gypsy Clydesdales and other things, or I have been doing. So there's a lot of, and healing and the mediumship and workshops is where what you'll find on my website.
Wonderful. And do you offer readings through there and healings?
Yes, I do also do remote work as well.
Okay.
Um, so yes, so
So wonderful. You just have a lot of years of experience and a lot of training too. And you're shamanic practitioner as well. You've brought shamanism into your work. And no,
yeah,
yeah,
heavy and alley of spirit passages in Yarmouth must be 15, 20 years ago. I was part of their inaugural group of shamanic training. So for 2 years, and it's really funny because when I was introduced to that synchronistically by people, because I set the intention, bring me the people and the resources to help me learn this, when I made the commitment to spirit to work on their behalf. And yeah, it was a 2 year course, 2 years of training every May and September. And for a week, we would go out to Harrison, Maine, and there was the Snowbird Lodge there. And from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, we would learn and develop through the 2 years to understand that realm. And I used to think that at first I was very hesitant, but it's one of the most powerful modalities
it
uh,
is.
that I've come across. And interestingly enough, it's the oldest because
Yeah.
that's what indigenous people do.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's so I also have done shamanic training and it's the original connection to spirit, the original human
Yeah.
spirit connection and this the rituals are so beautiful. Um so which is very different than being part of the NSAC, which means the National Spiritualist Association of Churches.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which very different than a shamanic practice. And and how do you find the two very one very organized and very people driven, and the other one is very just in a lot of different ways, individualistic or steeped in tradition. What?
The one thing that might be overlooked, and unless you go into the depths of spiritualism, we view the indigenous as the first spiritualists. It's in our educational course as well. But however, there's the other thing as well, that a large number of us spiritualists, believe in past lives. However, in the realm of a church service, we are asked not to give past life readings.
Well, yeah.
And respect that. But I know that past lives exist because our mission from the religion perspective is about removing the fear of death and about validating life is continuous.
Mhm.
So often we're really focused on, the last couple of tiers and levels of our life history. So, but yes, so it's at first it seems like they're not the same or they're not related, but I also had developed a workshop around when I was with the International Spiritualist Federation, International Spiritualist Federation, on the similar shamanism, the similarities and differences with spiritualism, and you actually find that, like in shamanism, we talk about the power animal. My power animal is a Siberian tiger. And in spiritualism, we talk about spirit guides. It's just, they're analogous. They
Yeah,
very
they
are
work
now.
together. They do work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of native indigenous people who have inspired spiritualism, like Temple Heights, developed around I forget his name, doctor. He was a medical doctor, became a healer, but his guide was Native American. Um, and I,
Oh, you're thinking of the Nicowa Lodge. Is that what
yeah,
you?
the Nicola Lodge. Yeah,
Yep, Nicowa. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Then Nicola was his teacher. So, so, and he was the teacher that brought him into that really a profound healing that he was able to do with people.
So
They,
one of our greatest pioneers, Andrew Jackson Davis, he's also known as John the Baptist of spiritualism and the
yeah,
Pekingsia, and he predicted a planet and other aspects, before it was even discovered. And Andrew Jackson Davis, his guide was named Galen, from the Greek philosophy days. Okay,
oh,
and and he created our first lyceum when he in his dreamtime space, he would see children in spirit, and they would be playing and be joyful, and it he would wonder about that. Well, they're deceased, but what he recognized was that the beauty of the child's spirit is so, I guess some people would say, so pure, that he wanted to share that experience with humanity, and that was a driving factor for him creating the original Lyceum, the Andrew. So you'll find in spiritualist camps and places like that that
yeah.
there are temples and buildings named after Andrew Jackson Davis. So he brought all that information and created educate or was part of our education. Um,
He was in the story with him is that he was illiterate from the he and then spirit came started channeling through him. I don't know the story really well, but I remember the spirit moved him or changed him. It felt like it was the Holy Spirit came upon him is what the story sounded like, but he was able to articulate and he wrote uh, uh, articulate some more complex ideas and he wrote a number of books. It's a tremendous story behind him.
there are a lot of stories there, I know, and there are a lot of great channelers as well, out in community as well. So all of that education and all of that science is available, and now through quantum physics, we're starting to validate that, which is what I find so so wonderful, that our pioneers.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Now it's validated by quantum physics.
yeah.
So.
That would be a very interesting, that'd be really interesting to tell those stories and bring them forward. Andrew Jackson Davis, I find him really hard to read.
Mhm.
It was turn of century language, and English has changed a lot since a lot of that stuff's come out. But it would be really kind of cool to see the thread that these spiritualists talked about and see what's happening now. Compare them.
Mhm.
I think it'd be worth exploring, in all honesty. But in talking about the history of spiritualism, I've always understood that it was a religion that changed the trajectory of our country, in the sense that it was became as we became the spiritualists kind of freed up people from having a priest or something in between them and God. And when that happened and the movement was so big, it seemed like the government was really wrapped up in a certain level of Christianity, and that shifted. Um, People shifted out of that thinking. What are your thoughts on that and how that applies to nowadays?
Oh yeah, and in fact, yesterday, March 31st, is the anniversary of the advent of modern spiritualism, March 31st, 1848. So we're from the quote religious perspective and the incorporation and all of that, we're a young religion, but the actual skill set and all of those teachings go back to ancient times. But the
Yeah,
advent of modern spiritualism is March 31st, 1848, when a peddler made his presence known to the Fox family and the Fox sisters in Hydesville Cottage. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, he was the dead peddler. I mean, he was the murdered peddler.
yep.
He made himself known from the other side, but it's just terrific. It was that standing up against, to me, the standing up against the tried and true rules of that style of Christianity, to say there's nothing between you and spirit. There's
Yeah, and I don't know. I apologize for not knowing the history of American culture, but the suffragettes and all of the people who fought for civil liberties, etc. A lot of them came out of the spiritualist movement.
they did. The spiritualist movement gave women a voice. It's how I read about. That's how I understood it as I was reading some of the history. That's what got me all fired up about um, about that, because about that time, and about how people's thoughts changed. And I still feel like this spiritualism, and I say we because I'm also a minister of spiritualism, have a powerful um, platform with spirit and thought and our theology in a way. We don't have dogma, we don't have rules, but we have principles that I sound like I'm giving a service and I'm not. But I don't mean to do that. But we have a lot to offer.
Yeah, I often say, and it comes out when I teach mediumship at like the local metaphysical store. They're like, "You mean there's a religion based on what you're teaching us?" It's the best kept secret in some cases,
Yeah.
So, and people will say to me, how do you feel about, the future and the religion of spiritualism? Well, to me, there's nothing. I mean, the religion is solid, okay, about the principles and the mechanics. I mean, indirectly, I'm a big football fan, so when I see people running down and then they score a touchdown and then they go, that's for my father up there. That's a spiritualist belief system, that the father is watching over me, etc. So we have the religion is present in other religions and present
Yeah.
in so many other aspects of life. That's why a lot of people, it's like Joseph Campbell with his rites of passage. We get to certain stages in our life where it's like, well, I want to go off and learn about this, or I want to go and learn about that, and so the tools and the principles of spiritualism is still alive and well. In fact, a week ago with Colby College, I was part of a panel discussion, and the theme was what haunts you. So the majority of people were, you know, I want to talk about ghosts, and I want to know what buildings, and like Lakewood Theater in Madison area, and yet I was participating from the perspective of the religion, and it was extremely successful. I mean, so these principles are in our youth, in these creative writing classes. We had a blast for an hour and a half talking and answering questions on what haunts you.
Like a lot of things haunt me. Yeah, yeah, it's terrific. It's just I I want to bring it back to where we started from a wee bit, is that the gifts that we have, the psychic gifts, the connection, the mediumistic gifts, that these gifts are meant to enhance our lives, fulfill our lives. The and we I think I have seen the concept of mediumship get lost in entertainment or woo woo stuff, but I feel the real message, because we were talking about Andrew Jackson Davis. He must be here. He was about those early spiritualists were about improving people's lives,
Correct.
and that is I think up now big time, so we understand the nature of our lives and the nature of why we're here and the nature of how these natural laws work. Getting back to that, what do you
Well,
think?
well, let's be honest, there's a lot of people who talk about law of attraction, okay? Or, and then there's like Michael Dooley and Thoughts Become Things, and he's written a book as well of the ten top things that spirit wants to tell you, etc. So what I, like I say, what I tell people is, yes, I'm going to teach you about the mechanics of how you can develop a protocol and how you can develop a methodology for you to communicate with your deceased loved ones or know when they're around, or develop that over a period of time, because it's taken me. So for example, now, instead of just saying I have a challenge in the heart, I've sort of said to spirit, I want to know if it's lung issues or whether it's heart issues. Okay. And now I also have asked for them for the detail of, is it going to another granularity? It's like, is it congestive heart failure, or is it occluded arteries? And so I just keep building on that communication skill, and they provide, so
Wow.
that we can take that to the level of the law of attraction and say, how do I do that? And it's really about taking to your heart in a very, very loving and positive way to say, this is where I would like my life to go to. And I now always say this or something better. Okay, I put that caveat on as well. Um, so I was raised, my father was in the military, and my father believed I wasn't the smart one. So my sister had private education from the age of 11 to 18 in England with a nice little uniform. And she was going to be the one who goes to university.
No
And when I
kidding.
had that dream about my car accident, everything focused for me. And then in 72, I visited my sisters and I said, I want to come and live and work in the United States. So everything I was doing, I had that vision and that dream in my heart. And I just made sure that I participated with spirit to have that manifest. So where I'm going with this is, I didn't I didn't have the grades to go to university.
Oh,
I ended up, because of the car accident, but I ended up going into part-time education, a TV technician, doing community college. Then a company, an American company, heard, or somehow I got in contact with them. They didn't like the degree I was being offered in my local town. And I just said, okay, what university, for example, would you recommend? And they told me that university. I called them up and I said, do you have any places? And they said, no, we start in 2 weeks. We have 75 students. Sorry, you haven't applied. And then I said, oh, that's a bummer. I was Sperry Gyroscope were interested. The guy just said, oh, if Sperry Gyroscope is willing to sponsor you and co-opt you, you have a place. So I then went and called the guy up and I said, have you sent the letter of declination? He said, no, I really apologize. I've been busy. I said, well, I've got a place at the university that you use. And he said, are you willing to go? I said, yep. And 2 weeks later, I was at university.
wonderful. Which university was it? Can you?
It was called Brunel University and
Oh, okay.
London Heathrow. So I did that. And right before I graduated, Sperry sold to British Aerospace and said, you don't have a job to come to. And I was like, oh, okay. So they were starting a master's degree in microchip design. They said, well, why don't you just stay on and do your master's? So I said, okay. And then 2 months later, there was an advertisement in a newspaper, come to New England for a job. And I was like, oh, I've just started my master's. Okay, I'll just delay it for a year and a half. So then when I finished at my master's degree, I went to work for General Electric in Wembley. And after about 3 months, I was walking out to go home to my parents, 2 hour drive. And a little voice or something made me look to the left and I saw a newspaper in the trash can. My analytical mind said, oh, that's Thursday's Daily Telegraph with all the jobs in. And you know what? The exact same advert from 2 years prior was in that trash can.
Wow.
That is the
Wow.
power of using your connection with the skills of the unseen realm of how it can happen. And I had no plans to become a medium at that time.
Oh my
So
God.
4 months later, I'm in the United States working for Fairchild Semiconductor in South Portland, Maine.
Wow. And you were there are you still there? Or you've been there a while?
Yeah, so I'm no, I there was big restructuring for me and the team that I was in 2015. So I've been retired from engineering for 10 years now. So,
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, it's, that's
but
something
that's
amazing.
how powerful learning
Yeah.
your intuition and utilizing it for your dreams, and then making sure that you always keep those dreams in mind and always taking steps to support those dreams.
It's
And
beautiful.
Spirit will provide.
Yeah, Spirit will provide that. They did. And so I gotta ask you this. Did Maine take a lot of your accent away? Your English accent away?
I guess people still recognize my British accent, but I wherever I moved, because I was an army brat, I could pick up the local dialect quite quickly. So
Okay.
when my father was stationed in Newcastle upon Tyne up near Scotland, everybody thought I was a born and bred
No kidding.
Geordie, and within.
You really have the touch that is awesome. That is awesome. Well, we're coming we're coming close to wrapping it up, but I was wondering if there's anything in particular you want to leave the listener, especially those of us stayed for the whole time. Um,
Sure. So what I'd like for people to really, really understand is that the innate ability of us being able to communicate with nature and through nature because of the Schumann resonance frequency of the planet, etc., is a skill that is innately part of us. And it's really about developing that skill to a level that it gives you the ability to make a lot better choices in your life. And for those of you who are interested in this broadcast because of wanting to develop the mediumship, I just encourage you as well to do that, because it is one of the greatest things we can do from a place of love and intention to help people get through grief.
Thank you. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. And I just want to remind people they could reach Graham Connolly at terrasaholistics.com. He is on Facebook as Graham Connolly. I think it's what is Graham? And then there's two initials.
Yeah, Graham L.S. Connolly.
Okay. Look him up, message him. He gets back to you pretty fast. I know he does when I message him. So, and take advantage. Everyone that I bring onto this podcast is available, is very kind-hearted, and is very interested in your well-being and your development and growth. And you can't say that about a lot of situations and a lot of people. And so I carefully pick people to come here who are really interested and on a mission to help others. And so thank you again, Graham, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll do some more work together on spiritualism. And so thank you again. And I guess that's all there is for this episode, but please stay tuned, and thank you so much, Graham. And you'll hear more from us later.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.